The Craxian First Scout Vraxel lounged in his command chair, mandibles clicking in amusement as he watched the intercepted broadcast from the primitive planet below. On his vid screen, a Earth feline, something called a lion, stalked through golden grass toward its prey. The narrator's voice droned on about the perfect predator of the African plains. Perfect. Vraxel's secondary heart pulsed with derision. These humans wouldn't know a perfect predator if it ate them. His crew chittered in agreement, their crystalline armor catching the light from the bridge's bioluminescent panels. At that exact moment, Dr. Emily Anderson was having a very different kind of night at the Arecibo Observatory's successor facility in New Mexico. Her late-night monitoring shift had been routine until 3 minutes ago, when the quantum interference patterns on her screen started doing impossible things. "Hey, Mike." She called to her assistant without taking her eyes off the readings. "Remember how we joked about wanting to be the ones to discover aliens?" She pushed her coffee mug aside, fingers flying across the haptic interface. "I don't think it's funny anymore." The patterns were unlike anything in their database, regular enough to be artificial, complex enough to be advanced, and moving in ways that violated 4 different laws of physics. As she watched, more signatures appeared, dropping out of what her instruments insisted was completely empty space. "My God," Mike whispered, now standing behind her chair. "Those are ships, aren't they?" Emily was already reaching for the red phone, the one they'd all joked about but never thought they'd use. "This is Dr. Anderson at White Sands. Get me General Hayes. Authorization code Delta 794. She swallowed hard. "We have a possible first contact scenario." Above them, Vraxel was making his own preparations. "Initiate full spectrum analysis of the population centers. I want to know everything about their defensive capabilities." He flexed his primary hunting claws, the crystalline edges catching starlight. "Though I doubt we'll need much to handle a species that thinks these lions are apex predators." The Craxian sensors swept Earth, their quantum fields penetrating deep into military installations, urban centers, and transportation networks. They saw the primitive combustion vehicles, the basic projectile weapons, the laughably simple digital networks. What they couldn't see, was how their scans were lighting up warning systems in facilities that officially didn't exist. Emily's call had started a chain reaction. In underground bunkers and secret command centers, generals and leaders were being woken up. At first, many were skeptical, until the satellite networks started going dark, one by one. 12 objects, sir, Emily reported to General Hayes, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Largest is approximately 3 kilometers in length. They're using some kind of stealth technology we can only detect through quantum interference. She paused, checking her latest readings. "And, sir, they're deploying smaller craft. Hundreds of them." In his ship, Vraxel prepared his report to the High Command. Planet designated Earth. Dominant species, bipedal omnivores calling themselves humans. Technology level. Pre-quantum. Threat assessment. Minimal. He flexed his hunting claws again, anticipation building. Recommendation. Immediate inclusion in the Great Hunt. These humans worship primitive predators. Let them meet their betters. The response was immediate. Permission granted. Glory to the hunt. Emily watched in horror as the quantum signatures began moving with purpose. "They're taking up attack positions, sir." Her voice caught as new data poured in. Multiple formations, covering every major city in the Northern Hemisphere. She looked at the tactical display, her blood running cold. "Sir, these patterns, they're hunting formations." Vraxel stood on his bridge, his crew moving with practiced precision. They had done this dozens of times on dozens of worlds. The hunt was their birthright, their destiny. These humans, with their primitive weapons and their worship of simple predators, would learn what true apex predators looked like. As dawn broke over New Mexico, Emily made one final call, not to the military this time, but to her sister in Chicago. "Lisa, get the kids and go to the cabin. Right now." She watched the quantum signatures descending through the atmosphere, their crystalline hulls beginning to glow with re-entry. Don't pack. Don't wait. Just go. She took a deep breath. And Lisa, remember how Dad always said we shouldn't fear the stars? He was wrong. The first Craxian ships broke through the cloud cover just as the sun rose, their crystalline hulls refracting the light like deadly prisms. The hunt was about to begin, and humanity was about to teach these apex predators a lesson about underestimating their prey. Jack Morrison knew something was wrong the moment he stepped out of his cabin in the Pridon light. 20 years of tracking predators had given him an almost supernatural sense for animal behavior, and right now, every instinct was screaming that the natural order had been disrupted. His wolf pack, the Gray Mountain group he'd been studying for the past 3 years, had abandoned their usual hunting grounds. The elk herds had scattered, breaking decades-old migration patterns. Even the ravens, nature's early warning system, were acting erratically. You're seeing it too, aren't you, girl? He scratched behind the ears of Luna, his half-wolf companion. The hybrid's hackles were raised, her eyes fixed on the tree line, where the morning mist curled like smoke. In their cloaked observation post half a mile away, Scout Leader Kextai watched the human through multiple spectrum analyzers. Subject demonstrates unusual awareness of environmental changes. She sub-vocalized to her pack. Possibility of enhanced sensory capabilities. Negative, her second responded. Scans show standard human biological markers. No augmentations detected. Jack pulled out his well-worn field journal, adding another data point to his growing collection of anomalies. 3 days ago, the beaver colony downstream had abandoned their dam, something they'd defend to the death under normal circumstances. Yesterday, the mountain lions had led their cubs down into the valley, weeks ahead of schedule. They're all running from something, he muttered, comparing his notes. But what makes apex predators retreat? Kexti's mandibles clicked in amusement. The primitive attempts to understand. She adjusted her crystalline armor's camouflage field. Yet he asks the right question. What indeed makes apex predators retreat, little human? Jack's radio crackled to life. Morrison. You there? We've got weird readings from the seismic monitors. Copy that, Rangers, he responded, already packing his gear. Let me guess. Started 3 days ago. Getting stronger. How'd you know? Because that's when everything started running. He shouldered his pack, checking his tranquilizer rifle out of habit. I'm heading to Overlook Point. Going to test a theory. The Craxian observers followed, their sophisticated stealth systems making them invisible to human eyes. But as they moved through the forest, something unusual happened. At each junction, each clearing, they found crude markers made from sticks and stones. Analysis? Kexti demanded. They appear to be tracking markers, her second responded, confusion evident in his subharmonics. The human is tracking us. Impossible. Our stealth field. Next marker will be in that clearing, Jack's voice carried from ahead, pointing northwest, because that's where you're pushing the wildlife. The Craxians froze. In the clearing ahead, Jack Morrison sat on a fallen log, calmly making notes in his journal. Luna lay at his feet, her eyes fixed directly on Kexti's position. You're good, Jack continued, not looking up. But you're disrupting predator-prey relationships that have evolved over millions of years. To someone who knows what to look for, you might as well be setting off fireworks. Kexti's battle instincts screamed to eliminate this threat, but her mission parameters were clear. Observe only. Explain your methodology, she demanded, keeping her stealth field active. Jack smiled, finally looking up. Though he couldn't see them, his eyes fixed unnervingly close to their position. 20 years ago, I tracked a mountain lion through 3 states using nothing but changes in songbird patterns. Did my doctoral thesis on using predator behavior to map environmental disruptions. He scratched Luna's ears again. You're just a bigger disruption than usual. In her command center, Kexti sent an urgent update to High Command. The human hadn't just detected their presence. He predicted their movements, anticipated their patterns, and turned their own hunting strategy into a trail they'd obligingly followed. "Oh, and one more thing," Jack added, standing. "Your cloaking technology, it's impressive, but it's based on predator camouflage patterns. That's why Luna can see you. Canines don't process visual information the way we do. They track movement patterns." He started walking away. "There's another marker by the creek. It'll tell you where I'm going next. Follow if you want, but remember who's tracking who." As the human disappeared into the forest, Kexti felt something she hadn't experienced since her first hunt: uncertainty. They had come to study a primitive species, only to find themselves being studied instead. The hunt was becoming far more interesting than anyone had anticipated. Major Diana Rodriguez stood in Fort Mackenzie's command center, studying the holographic terrain map with the intensity of a chess grandmaster. Around her, junior officers rushed to fortify the base's defenses, but her attention was fixed on the wildlife camera feeds. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Cooper called out, "satellite coverage is dark. Radar's getting nothing but ghost returns." Diana nodded, her eyes never leaving the feeds. "Look at the coyotes, Lieutenant. See how they're moving." She traced a pattern on the map. "They're being herded, just like wolves do with prey." Her unusual background, Special Forces combat trainer turned wildlife behavior specialist, had earned her share of skepticism. Right now, though, it might be the only thing keeping her people alive. "They're not just copying wolf tactics," she muttered. "They're perfecting them." Above the base, Hunt Master Vac Thor watched his pack deploy with practiced precision. 3 centuries of military evolution had refined their hunting patterns to perfection. The human facility below, with its primitive kinetic barriers and laughable projectile weapons, wouldn't last 10 minutes. "Standard encirclement pattern," he commanded. "Drive them to the killing ground." His warriors moved like liquid shadow, their crystalline armor adapting to the terrain. They had performed this dance on 100 worlds. The strategy was flawless, tested by evolution itself. Diana's voice crackled across the base comm system. "All units, execute Protocol Mongoose." Vac Thor's mandibles clicked in amusement as he watched the humans scramble. Their movements seemed chaotic, undisciplined. His warriors tightened the noose, herding the prey exactly where. The first explosion caught 3 of his best hunters, not from above or below, but from the side. Impossible. Their flanks were secured. The hunting pattern was perfect. A second explosion. Then a third. His warriors were being picked off from angles that shouldn't exist. "Status," he demanded. "Pattern disruption," his sub-commander reported. "The humans, they're not running to the killing ground. They're everywhere." Diana allowed herself a small smile as she watched the alien formation crumble. "When you study enough pack hunters," she said to no one in particular, "you learn that perfect patterns have perfect flaws." Her troops had deployed in what looked like panic, but was actually a complex anti-predator strategy she'd developed studying how mongooses confused cobra strikes. Each squad moved erratically but precisely, creating gaps that looked like opportunities but were actually killboxes. "They're adapting," someone shouted, "changing their pattern." "No," Diana corrected. "They're falling back on instinct." Switch to Phase 2. Across the battlefield, pre-positioned speakers activated, broadcasting a carefully engineered mix of subsonic frequencies. To human ears, it was barely noticeable. To the Kraxians, with their highly evolved hunting senses, it was like having their nervous systems scrambled. Vac Thor fought through the disorientation. Impossible. These primitives, they couldn't. "Sir, they're using our own hunting frequencies against us." Diana watched through her binoculars as the alien formation dissolved into chaos. Her teams had spent months studying wolf pack communications, developing counter-frequencies. The aliens might be more advanced, but they still operated on similar principles. "Now," she commanded, "hit them. Fort Mackenzie's hidden defenses activated, not the obvious gun emplacements the aliens had mapped, but hundreds of smaller weapons concealed in ways that mimicked how prairie dogs hide their burrow entrances. The targeting systems, based on how bats track prey through interference patterns, cut through the aliens' stealth fields. Vakthor watched in horror as his perfect hunting pack was systematically dismantled by prey that refused to act like prey. These humans weren't just fighting back. They were using the very principles of predator behavior against his forces. "Full retreat," he ordered, the words burning in his throat. "Return to the ships." As the aliens withdrew, leaving behind damaged equipment and fallen warriors, Diana finally allowed herself to breathe. She picked up a piece of the crystalline armor, studying how it responded to light and movement. "Get this to R and D," she ordered, "and someone get me a line to command. Tell them we got proof of concept." She smiled grimly. The perfect predator just learned they're not so perfect after all. In orbit, Vakthor prepared his report to High Command. For the first time in his long career, he felt something alien to his species: doubt. These humans hadn't just survived. They had turned his hunter's perfect evolution against them. The hunt was becoming a nightmare. Bobby Thompson's garage in Detroit looked like a mad scientist's laboratory had collided with an auto repair shop. Pieces of alien crystalline armor lay scattered across workbenches, next to dismantled engine parts and prototype materials he'd been developing for electric vehicles before the invasion. "You're telling me this isn't working because we're thinking too advanced." General Hayes's voice crackled through the jury-rigged secure line. Bobby adjusted his safety goggles, studying the holographic model projected from his modified engine diagnostic tool. "That's exactly it, sir. We've been approaching this all wrong." He picked up a piece of the alien armor. Everyone assumed their tech was more advanced than ours. Turns out, it's just different. The general's skepticism was almost visible through the static. "Explain it to me like I'm 5, Thompson." "Look at how they build everything," Bobby said, excitement creeping into his voice. "It's all biological principles. They evolved as perfect predators and never had to think beyond that." He grabbed his tablet, sending over his latest test results. Their armor isn't advanced tech. It's advanced evolution. And that's their weakness. In his makeshift lab, surrounded by failed experiments and breakthrough prototypes, Bobby had discovered something extraordinary. The Craxians' technology wasn't based on engineering principles. It was based on perfecting natural processes. Their ships didn't have engines. They had crystalline structures that functioned like massive muscles. Their weapons weren't based on physics as humans understood it. They were organic growth taken to its logical extreme. "The thing about evolution," Bobby continued, pulling up his old automotive research, "is that it's great at creating perfect solutions for specific problems. But those solutions are often inflexible." He demonstrated by subjecting a piece of alien armor to a simple electrical current, something his team had been working on for next-generation car batteries. The crystalline structure didn't just fail. It completely reconfigured itself. "They never developed electricity the way we did because they never needed to," he explained. "Their whole civilization is built on biological principles taken to the extreme. But sometimes, the simple solution beats the perfect one." In orbit, the Craxian science director, Nixtel, was reaching a horrifying conclusion of her own. "The humans are not following any evolutionary logic," she reported to High Command. "Their technology is chaotic, imperfect, but adaptive in ways we never considered." Bobby's breakthroughs spread like wildfire. Across the globe, scientists and engineers began looking at alien technology not as something to copy, but as something to counter using Earth's primitive technology. Car manufacturers retooled their assembly lines to produce weapons that could disrupt alien biocrystalline structures. Electronics companies found that simple EMP devices could confuse the aliens' perfect hunting senses. "They're starting to adapt," Bobby warned during an emergency conference call with global defense leaders. But that's where we have another advantage. They adapt through evolution. We adapt through innovation. He demonstrated by showing how the aliens had modified their armor to resist electrical attacks, making it stronger but also more brittle. His team had already developed 3 new countermeasures, testing and deploying them faster than the Craxians could evolve defenses. Evolution is about finding the perfect solution, he explained. Innovation is about finding new solutions. And right now, we're innovating faster than they can evolve. The Craxian High Command was facing an unprecedented crisis. Their perfect predator evolution, refined over millennia, was being undone by creatures who seemed to delight in finding imperfect but effective solutions to every problem. How do they do it? Nixtel demanded, studying reports of yet another human technological breakthrough. How do they develop new adaptations so quickly? Bobby's garage had become the heart of Earth's technological resistance. Engineers and scientists from around the world shared their findings, each breakthrough building on the last. The aliens' biological perfection was being countered by human ingenuity, their evolutionary advantages turned into weaknesses by beings who had never stopped looking for new ways to solve old problems. You know what the real difference is. Bobby told a room full of international scientists, holding up his latest prototype. They evolved to be perfect. We evolved to be better. And that's why we're going to win. The innovation arms race was on, and humanity's greatest weapon wasn't our technology. It was our ability to think beyond biological limits, to find solutions that evolution never imagined. Commander Marcus Wells stood at the edge of the Venezuelan rainforest, listening to the howler monkeys in the distance. 6 months ago, he'd been leading Marine Force recon teams in standard combat operations. Now he was about to wage psychological warfare against alien pack predators using principles he'd learned from primate behavior studies. Broadcast sites are ready, sir, Lieutenant Rivera reported, checking the quantum-enhanced speakers they'd developed using Bobby Thompson's breakthroughs. Though I still don't understand how this is supposed to work. Marcus smiled, remembering his own skepticism when he'd first proposed this strategy. You ever watch what happens when you play recorded wolf howls to different packs? He asked, checking the final configurations on his tablet. It disrupts their entire social structure. Now imagine that, but with a species that's evolved an even more rigid pack hierarchy. In orbit, young Craxian Commander Zixtal was already questioning that hierarchy. The human resistance had proved far more effective than anyone had predicted, and their latest attacks seemed designed not to kill, but to confuse. Status report, he demanded from his pack leaders. Uncertain, Commander, came the reply. We're detecting multiple distress signals from our forward units, but the patterns don't match any known combat situations. Marcus's team had spent weeks studying captured Craxian communication devices, learning how their pack coordination worked. What they'd found was both a strength and a critical weakness. The aliens' neural networks were so perfectly evolved for pack hunting that they'd never developed alternative communication methods. Begin Phase 1, Marcus ordered. Across the combat zone, speakers activated, broadcasting carefully crafted signals that mimicked Craxian pack distress calls. But these weren't simple recordings. They were algorithmically generated messages that exploited the aliens' own pack psychology against them. Zixtal felt his warriors' confusion through their neural link. The signals suggested multiple packs in crisis, each one claiming different leadership authority, each one demanding immediate response. It violated every protocol of their rigid hierarchy. It's a trick, he announced, but even as he said it, he felt the doubt spreading through his pack. Their perfect coordination was beginning to fracture. Marcus watched through high-powered binoculars as the alien formation began to break down. They've never had to question their pack structure before, he explained to his team. Their evolution made it perfect, which means they never developed ways to handle imperfection. The next phase of the attack introduced something the Craxians had never encountered: contradictory pack orders, signals suggesting both retreat and advance, both submission and dominance, all carrying the neural signatures of valid pack leaders. Impossible, Zixtal whispered, as he felt his warriors' instincts war with their training. The humans had somehow learned to speak their pack language, but they spoke it like chaos given voice. In his command center, Marcus activated the final phase. The beautiful thing about perfect systems, he said, is that they're often the most fragile. One crack, and the whole thing can shatter. The crack came in the form of a simple question, broadcast through the Craxian neural network. What if the pack is wrong? For a species that had evolved perfect pack harmony, it was like a virus in their collective consciousness. Warriors began breaking formation, their instincts unable to process the contradiction between loyalty and logic. Zixtal watched in horror as his perfect hunting pack transformed into chaos. Some warriors followed old orders, some followed new ones, and some simply froze, their evolutionary programming unable to handle the paradox. Full retreat, he ordered, but even that simple command now carried uncertainty. How could they trust any orders when their very method of communication had been turned against them? Marcus lowered his binoculars as the alien forces withdrew in disarray. Sometimes the best way to fight perfect predators, he told his amazed team, is to make them question their own perfection. In the aftermath, Zixtal would report something unprecedented to high command. The humans hadn't just defeated their forces, they'd made them question the very foundation of their society. And a perfect predator that starts to question its perfection ceases to be perfect at all. Dr. Amanda Hayes had never expected her research on dolphin communication networks to become Earth's secret weapon. Yet here she stood, in a converted missile silo deep under the Montana plains, staring at neural pattern displays that could change the course of the war. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the holographic display where captured Craxian neural signals pulsed in complex patterns. Their pack communication isn't just a network, it's a prison. General Hayes, her sister, leaned forward to study the display. "Explain. Remember when we were kids, and I could always tell when you were about to steal my comics?" Amanda's eyes never left the data streams. That's because siblings learn each other's patterns. Now imagine that, but evolved over millions of years into a perfect, unbreakable system. She pulled up another display, this one showing Craxian brain activity during combat. They don't just communicate, they think as one. It made them perfect predators, but it also made them predictable. In his ship above Earth, young Commander Zixtal was experiencing that predictability firsthand. Every battle plan, every strategy that had worked for centuries was now being countered before they could execute it. It was as if the humans could read their very thoughts. "They can," Amanda explained to a room full of military leaders. "Not literally, but we've cracked their neural code. Every formation, every attack pattern is telegraphed through their pack network before they make it. They can't help it. It's how they evolved to hunt." She demonstrated by predicting the next 3 Craxian attacks with perfect accuracy. Their combat formations weren't just tactics, they were instincts hardwired into their neural network over millennia of evolution. "But here's the real breakthrough," Amanda said, pulling up a new display. "We're not just reading their signals, we're learning how to hack them." The first test came during a Craxian attack on a Pacific naval base. As their warriors moved in perfect formation, Amanda's team broadcast a carefully crafted neural signal. The effect was immediate and devastating. "What's happening?" Zixtal demanded as his warriors began moving in chaotic patterns. "Their instincts are fighting their training," Amanda explained to the observing officers. "We're not just jamming their communications, we're making them question their own thoughts." The Craxian High Command watched in horror as battle after battle turned into chaos. Their perfect hunters were being turned into confused prey by signals that spoke directly to their most basic instincts. How are they doing this? The High Commander demanded. How can these primitives understand our neural network better than we do? The answer, Amanda knew, lay in human imperfection. We never evolved a perfect communication system, she told her team. So we had to study how they work. We had to understand the principles behind them. The Craxians never had to learn because they were born with it. She pulled up images of different Earth species, dolphins, ants, bees, all with their own forms of group communication. We've spent centuries studying how different species coordinate. The Craxians only ever had to perfect one system. The turning point came when Amanda's team deployed their most ambitious project yet. A system that could insert false memories into the Craxian neural network. Not just commands or sensations, but actual experiences that never happened. Their perfect memory system is their greatest vulnerability, she explained. They trust it completely because it's never failed them before. Until now. Zixtel felt his world crumbling as false memories cascaded through his neural link. Victories turned to defeats, certainties became doubts, and the unbreakable bond of the pack began to crack. We're not just fighting their bodies, Amanda told the War Council. We're fighting their minds. And in that arena, human adaptability beats alien perfection every time. As the Craxian forces fell into disarray, Amanda watched the neural patterns shift and change. They were learning, adapting, but too slowly. Evolution had made them perfect predators, but humanity had become something far more dangerous. Predators of the mind. Professor James Wild Jim Mitchell wiped the sweat from his brow as he studied the holographic comparison between Earth and Craxian DNA. The Amazon Research Station, hidden deep in the rainforest, had become an unlikely front in understanding their alien adversaries. Look at this pattern, he said to his research team, pointing to the genetic markers. Their entire species evolved on a world that never changed. No ice ages, no major climate shifts, no mass extinctions, just perfect, unchanging stability. Dr. Maria Santos, his leading geneticist, leaned forward, and that made them vulnerable. Not vulnerable, Jim corrected, pulling up Earth's geological history. Perfect. They became the perfect predators, because their world allowed for perfection. But Earth, he gestured to the chaotic climate data, Earth never gave us that luxury. Above their hidden facility, a Craxian scout ship passed unaware, its sensors confused by the dense canopy and the biological camouflage systems Bobby Thompson had developed. Inside, Scout leader Rixna was coming to her own disturbing conclusions about human evolution. High Command, she reported, I believe I understand why our perfect strategies are failing. These humans, they're not just adaptive. They're adaptation itself. Jim was reaching the same conclusion from the other direction. His team had been studying how Earth species adapted to rapid environmental changes, and the pattern was clear. The most successful species weren't the most perfectly adapted, but the most adaptable. Look at our history, he explained to the Emergency Scientific Council. Ice ages, floods, meteors, volcanic winters. Earth has thrown everything at us. We never had the chance to become perfect at any one thing because we had to become good at everything. The evidence was in the genetics, where Craxian DNA showed millions of years of refinement toward perfect predation. Human DNA told a story of constant change, of desperate adaptations, of solutions that weren't perfect but were good enough to survive. Their perfection is their weakness, Jim declared, showing comparative brain scans. They evolved to be the ultimate predator, but we evolved to be ultimate survivors. They can't even conceive of solutions that aren't perfect, but imperfect solutions are humanity's specialty. Rixna's report to High Command carried similar warnings. Their unpredictability isn't a flaw, it's their strength. Every time we perfect a defense, they don't try to perfect their attack. They simply change the game entirely. In his lab, Jim demonstrated with a simple experiment. He showed how Craxian combat formations mirrored the hunting patterns of Earth's pack predators, but with a level of coordination that made them nearly invincible against predictable prey. "But we're not predictable," he said, playing videos of human counter-tactics. "We don't just run or fight. We invent new options. We change the rules. We do things that make no evolutionary sense, and that's precisely why they work." The implications were staggering. The Craxians hadn't just evolved to be perfect predators. They'd evolved to be perfectly predictable. Their strategies worked because they were perfect, but they failed because they couldn't be anything else. "That's why all our primitive solutions keep working," Jim explained. "Their technology, their tactics, their entire society is built on perfecting natural processes. But nature on Earth taught us something different. Sometimes the best solution is the one nobody expects." As if to prove his point, his team had developed a new defense system based not on advanced technology, but on the simple way bombardier beetles mixed chemicals for defense. It was messy, imperfect, and completely baffling to the Craxian sensors. "We're not going to win this war by being better than them," he told the council. "We're going to win it by being different, by being imperfect, by being human." The final data sets confirmed what Earth's defenders had felt instinctively. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't any single adaptation, but our ability to keep adapting. We were the species that had never stopped evolving, never settled for perfection, never stopped looking for new ways to survive. In the end, Jim said, watching the Craxian ship pass overhead, they made the same mistake so many Earth species made. They became too perfect, too specialized. They forgot the first rule of survival. The only perfect adaptation is the ability to adapt. Kelly Foster had never wanted to be a hero. 6 months ago, she'd been teaching high school biology in Minnesota. Now she stood at the gates of the largest refugee camp in North America, facing down a pack of desperate Craxian warriors. "They're starving," she said into her combat comm, watching the alien forces through her neural-enhanced binoculars. "Their supply lines are cut, their pack structure is breaking down, and they're running on pure instinct. Evacuate the camp," command ordered. "We'll have strike teams there in 20 minutes." But Kelly had seen something in the aliens' movements that others had missed. As a biology teacher, she'd spent years studying animal behavior. These weren't the coordinated movements of hunters. They were the desperate actions of the hunted. "No," she said, making a decision that would change the course of the war. "I'm going out there." Commander Zixtal, now leading the desperate raid pack, watched in confusion as a single human female emerged from the camp's gates. His warriors, once the pride of the Craxian fleet, were now reduced to raiding for basic supplies after Earth's forces had systematically destroyed their support network. "She carries no weapons," his second reported, equally confused. Kelly walked steadily forward, her hands visible and empty. Behind her, the refugee camp housed 10,000 survivors from 3 countries. She could feel the weight of their lives on her shoulders, but she also felt something else. Hope. "I know you can understand me," she called out, her voice carrying across the no-man's land. "And I know you're starving. I'm here to offer you a choice." The Craxians froze, their perfect hunting formation wavering. In their entire history, prey had never offered them choices. Prey ran, fought, or died. This was different. "Your supply lines are cut," Kelly continued, taking another step forward. "Your neural network is compromised. Your perfect system is breaking down, but you don't have to die here." Zixtal felt the last remnants of his pack's cohesion crumbling. The human was right. They were no longer the perfect predators. They had become prey themselves, driven by hunger and desperation. "We have food," Kelly said, her voice gentle but firm. We have shelter. We have medical supplies. But more than that, we have something you've never experienced. Change. Growth. The chance to be more than what evolution made you. In orbit, the Craxian High Command watched in disbelief as their once invincible warriors faced a choice their perfect evolution had never prepared them for. Adapt or die. Your perfection was your strength, Kelly said, now close enough to see the crystalline patterns in their armor. But look at what it cost you. You can't change, can't grow, can't become anything other than what you are. We can teach you how. Zixtal stepped forward, breaking formation for the first time in his life. Why? He asked, his translator converting the complex neural signal into sound. Why offer this? Kelly smiled, thinking of all her years teaching students about adaptation and survival. Because that's what humans do. We don't just adapt to survive. We help others adapt too. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us strong. The choice that followed would be studied for generations. One by one, the Craxian warriors laid down their weapons, not in surrender, but in transformation. They had come to Earth as perfect predators and found something more powerful than perfection: the ability to change. In the months that followed, Kelly's refugee camp became a symbol of what humanity had been trying to teach the Craxians all along. Perfect predators could only hunt and kill. But humans, imperfect, adaptable, compassionate humans, could do something far more impressive. They could learn, teach, and grow. The real victory, Kelly would later write in her memoirs, wasn't in defeating them. It was in showing them that there's something better than being perfect. There's being alive, being free, being able to choose what you become. And as the last Craxian ships left Earth's orbit, they carried with them not just the memory of defeat, but the seeds of their own evolution. They had come as perfect predators and left as something new, something wonderfully, powerfully imperfect. Humanity had proved that the true apex of evolution wasn't the species that had become perfect, but the one that never stopped changing.